Hello and welcome to the Literary Lair. The Christmas season means a lot of things to many people. Family, giving, nostalgia, and most especially, a guaranteed new episode of Doctor Who. However, Doctor Who will not have a Christmas special this year. Instead, we'll be getting a New Year's special, which I don't actually mind, since I feel like they've done every Christmas plot that they could ever possibly come up with. They already had Santa in one of them. Where can you really go from there? Though, Nash and Tara recently brought up the idea of an episode based on the Swedish Christmas goat on Radio Dead Air, and I would love to see the Doctor tackle that. But because I missed the 55th anniversary, I want to have a Doctor Who Christmas anyway. And I left the choice up to you guys, which admittedly was a bit of a mistake. There were 12 stories and, well, everybody wins. Just this once. Everybody wins. In that there was a tie between 6 stories, so I had to do a tie-break. The story I picked is Ghost of Christmas Past, written by Scott Handcock, and featuring the 8th Doctor as played by Paul McGann. Handcock is a writer-director for Doctor Who, namely Big Finish, having written for both Doctor Who and Bernice Summerfield, and in fact directed most of my favorite Big Finish stuff. I chose this story for 2 simple reasons, namely that it was one of 2 stories featuring a Doctor that we haven't talked about during any of my other Doctor Who reviews, and I flipped a coin. Oh, and because I haven't done a Doctor Who video since before Jodie Whittaker took over the role, allow me to answer a few questions you might have about my thoughts on the new series. I love Whittaker as the Doctor, the season was overall very good and a return to form. I liked how everything was sort of self-contained apart from the opening and the finale, with references seeded throughout, but without any major events, so you could jump around if you'd like. Though I did feel that Kerblam wasted its concept on the old automation plot, when it could have done a meta-commentary on Amazon's treatment of workers, which it really looked like it was gonna do, and I really love the companions. I don't have a favorite, but if I did, it would probably be a toss-up between Graham or Yaz. Or Ryan. I can't really decide who I like the best. Other than that, I think that pretty much covers it. So, let's see what the 8th Doctor is up to on Christmas Eve during the last Great Time War. On to the review. So we're not going to talk about the cover that much, apart from it being TARDIS blue and featuring silhouettes of the first 12 Doctors on it, along with having the TARDIS in it in the middle and gold Gallifreyan writing seated about. Full disclosure, I don't know how to read that writing, so if you do, let me know in the comments what it said. I'm kind of curious. However, I do want to talk briefly about the illustration. Every story has their own illustration, and I just want to remark on how beautiful this one is. I mean, they're all beautiful in their own way, but specifically this one. Doctor Who covers are never strong on this show, but I do like the illustration, which basically acts as the cover of the story. Anyway, on to the story itself. The story opens up with the Doctor in a bout of temporal turbulence caused by the last Great Time War. If you've seen The Night of the Doctor, you know that the 8th Doctor had no desire to join in on the war, but tended to get involved in order to save people where he could, like Cass. Problem with the Time War is that all that temporal energy wreaks havoc with timelines, and in this instance, the people that the Doctor saved were wiped out of existence when the timelines shifted, meaning that all his effort was for naught. And that sort of thing kinda puts a damper on the 8th Doctor's usually optimistic spirit. Something strikes the TARDIS, which I bet is either the Titanic or we're about to see Time Crash Part 2. You know, I bet the 5th Doctor just disentangled himself from 10's TARDIS too. Actually, the TARDIS has gotten trapped between 2 conflicting timelines, and the Doctor's only recourse is to drop out of the vortex and hope he can recover, which he does, emerging on 11:59 p.m. on Christmas Eve, orbiting Earth. This raises his spirits, since Earth is his home away from home after all, and he sets a course for landing, but the TARDIS won't budge. He double-checks everything, and it should be working properly, but for some reason the TARDIS won't cooperate. You just know he's accidentally leaning on the brake lever. The Doctor reasons that the old girl is just tired, since he'd been running her ragged with his futile attempts to stave off the Time War, so he settles in and waits for her to start up again. Meaning that he's basically trapped in a time loop on the final moment of Christmas Eve. Which is hilarious if you've heard the chimes of midnight, because it means that the same damn thing happened to the same damn incarnation twice. If you've seen any amount of Doctor Who, you know the one thing that the Doctor hates more than Daleks, Centaurans, or Cybermen is inactivity. So even if he is patient with the TARDIS, he wants to be going places, seeing people. Especially since when he's alone with himself, it gets rather boring. For him at least. I still maintain that Heaven Sent was the best hour of television I've seen to date. To take his mind off of eternity, he reads, paces, checks the readouts. After about 3 hours, which is a shorter time than I've spent in medical office waiting rooms with nothing to do, the Doctor has had quite enough with all the waiting and gets frustrated. Suddenly, there's a knock on the door. Now, not many people can find their way to the front door of a TARDIS trapped in a time loop, so the Doctor rushes and opens the door, but finds nothing out in the void. Damn ding-dong ditchers, even in the time vortex you can't escape them. He returns to the console room, and it starts to get a little colder inside, and on the console the Doctor finds an envelope with his name on it, and inside the envelope a Christmas card with nothing written inside. Happens to me all the time. I do everything right, sealing the envelope just right, and then I realize I forgot to write something on the damn card. Then he hears a voice and feels a presence, following it into the bowels of the TARDIS, past the rooms that the companions used to inhabit. While walking, his thoughts naturally drift past companions, how they left him, why, and if he ever sought them out again, which he admits to not doing nearly as often as he should. He starts to open a door, but stops himself and returns to the console room. He finds that the console room is brighter and the room is full of snow, no doubt an after effect of the Capaldi-era Christmas special intros. On top of the console is a small wrapped gift, a Time Lord hypercube. Who could it be sending him the message? The Corsair? Romana? The Master? He opens it and discovers Susan, his granddaughter, but much younger than when they had last met, the cube likely having been sent relatively shortly after he left her behind on Earth in the 22nd century. She tells her grandfather of how her life has gone, how she settled down with David Campbell, had a son named Alex, which makes the Doctor smile sadly, and she remarks about how humans celebrate their holidays and how unique it is. She asks for the Doctor to visit soon and for him to give her love to Ian and Barbara before the message ends. The Doctor is given new life by the message. If the humans could be resilient and bounce back from the Daleks, he could do the very same. The Time War is not an ending. When he opens his eyes, the TARDIS is back to normal, and he realizes that the TARDIS has orchestrated the entire thing, probably because that exact moment was when he most needed to hear from Susan the most. And the TARDIS releases itself from the time loop, allowing the Doctor to go onwards onto his next adventure with new life breathed into him. The only character we really see is the Eighth Doctor, and he acts about how I've come to expect from the various Big Finish stuff, though, for a change, he hasn't suddenly gotten amnesia again, so we actually get to see him and not Zebediah Doe. One thing I like is that this factors in the Big Finish stuff, and not just because it uses their version of Susan's life after the Doctor. Time for some backstory, spoilers if you don't know the Eighth Doctor's Big Finish history. In a Big Finish release, An Earthly Child, the Eighth Doctor finds himself on 22nd century Earth 30 years after he had last been there. The world isn't doing too well, and a lot of the people have become xenophobic as a result of the Dalek invasion, which doesn't sit well with Susan, considering her son Alex, played by Paul McGann's real-life son Jake, is half Time Lord. on his mother's side. Though he doesn't get any of the fun stuff, one heart, no regeneration, or telepathy. Bit of a waste, really. Susan attempts to contact a benevolent alien race to help Earth, which obviously goes awry, and the Doctor shows up to save the day, meeting Alex and finding out all the stuff about the world from Susan, and at the end of the story, the Doctor offers Alex a chance to live on Gallifrey and be raised as a Time Lord, but he refuses, wanting to remain behind on Earth. Though Alex joins the Doctor for a few adventures, he meets a grisly fate during a scrape with the Daleks, which is a catalyst, along with Susan's refusal to join him again to be his moral compass, and the deaths of his other two companions, for the Eighth Doctor's darker direction and the stuff that edges closer to his regeneration, like dark eyes, and likely had a hand in his desire to regenerate into a warrior. And it's subtle. Subtle enough that I wasn't quite sure if I noticed it the first time or not, but when the Doctor smiles sadly, it's because he remembers Alex's death. That's in addition to him remarking how young Susan was, meaning that at the very least, he remembered the 5 Doctors and meeting her in the death zone. Despite being a short story, this manages to fit in a lot of the angst that the 8th Doctor had in Night of the Doctor, and relates it into the Christmas theme a lot better than I feel like a lot of the televised specials have. This doesn't just take place on Christmas or have snow in it, it inhabits the spirit of the season. And Susan's message is nice, and it all meshes with what was in An Earthly Child, though it's not really a surprise considering Hancock's relationship with Big Finish. There's not a whole lot of action, since this is essentially a bottle episode in that it takes place entirely within the TARDIS, and features no action outside of it, but there is a whole lot of suspense as you wonder, especially with a title like Ghost of Christmas Past, what exactly the Doctor is going to find. That is, if you didn't see the illustration beforehand, but even then, you don't have the context for it. For all you knew, the ghost gave him the hypercube. I especially like the descriptions of the TARDIS and the corridor and the warmer console room. It was really easy to visualize the story and see it, especially because the 8th Doctor's console room was seen in the TV movie, so it was like a little episode in my head. Hancock is pretty good with descriptive writing that doesn't feel like slow plotting exposition. The story is brilliant. While some of the other stories in the anthology are just as touching, I'm happy that this is the one that won, technically because it was a delight to read. We've got some good Time War angst, callbacks to one of my favorite 8th Doctor audio dramas, and a really suspenseful lead-up to the heartfelt message from Susan. I highly recommend this entire book, but this story is definitely a highlight of it. If you don't have much experience with the 8th Doctor outside of the movie and his regeneration, you don't really need to know the Big Finish stuff, although it absolutely enhances the story to know Susan's story and Alex's ultimate fate. Really, what you need to know is that the Doctor had a granddaughter that he left behind on an Earth that had just fought off the Daleks. If you want more Time War 8th Doctor fun, along with 3 other stellar stories, check out Classic Doctor's New Monsters Volume 1, which in addition to having 5, 6, and 7 facing off against modern enemies, you have a Time War 8th Doctor and a Dan Starkey Centauran, which explores a similar theme of the Time War very well. Honestly, if it wasn't for the fact that the entire box set is pretty awesome, I'd say that one was my favorite. But back to the topic at hand, Ghost of Christmas Past is a wonderfully bittersweet Christmas story featuring a very underrated Doctor. Don't skip 9, but definitely give 8 a chance. Next week, it's time to return to the world of weird spin-offs and take a look at the next bizarre entry in the Brady series. And I think it's gonna be a very Brady Christmas. Did you see what I did there? Yeah, see you next time.